Okay, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, to see so many community practitioners. So I'm a data scientist, and I'm a data geek, so I play a lot with numbers. On top of that, I also get to explain a lot of these things using, I would say, social principles, right? Because sometimes people don't want to look at data. Okay, so today I'm going to talk to you about the science of sustained engagement. And this is the agenda I will follow. And I know I'm standing between you guys and the food, so bear with me for an hour. Okay, so we're going to start talking about like some sustainable social strategies, and and then trying to understand how relationships actually work, because that's really important, right? Social media and community is all about relationship. And in fact, social media, the most interesting thing about social media is the social part. Right? If you take away the social, then you just get media. Right? So we have to understand a little bit about relationship, and then we look at how we can apply these science and understanding of how human relationship work to customer relationship, and then we take a look at the monetary implication of that. Okay, so let's begin. So I go around a lot and speaking about my work, and when I go to conferences, people often talk about social strategies. And these social strategies are really good at helping companies scale, okay? Essentially help them get more customers. And that's really good and really important, but today we actually have a lot of technology to help us do that, right? So with better technology, we could actually scale better, right? We could do more with less. And this is really important, like I said, but in the social world, this is actually not good enough. Right? And several reasons that this is not good enough is that there's only so much you can scale. Right? If you get the world's population, then you can't scale anymore. But if you say, if I get the world population, who cares? Right? But you won't get there. You actually, a more realistic cap for you is a situation called a market saturation. Right? You will saturate, and then you can't, it becomes a game of diminishing return, right? And then you just really, really hard to scale further and further. So the second reason that this is not good enough is because the technology that help you scale is highly, highly commoditized. Okay, anyone could reach 1 million people on Twitter. Startups could do that. Okay, if you use Facebook, right? Anybody could use Facebook, right? They could reach people across the globe, right? Highly, highly commoditized. So not differentiating at all, right? And lastly, if you look at the financial impact, right, it actually there's not very much sustained financial impact. If you actually implement some of these, I would say, social strategies out there, right, and you measure kind of the result, this is typically what you see. You get a spike like this, right, and then it goes away, right? This metric could be any social metric, right? Could be replies, conversations, mentions, fans, followers, members in your community, right? Could be any social metric that you want. You typically get a huge spike, and then it comes back, goes away, right? But if you look at the financial impact, typically looks something like this. Now, there is a little blip here, right? So it does matter. It does make a difference, but it doesn't stay. Okay, so this actually brings us to another dimension to look at the success of your social strategy, and that's basically sustainability, right? So this is actually very hard, right? How many people actually think about their social strategy or community strategy, 10 years down the line? Okay, some people do here, very good. How many people think about 50 years down the line? How many look at 100 years down the line? All right. So, but the truth is that not many people think about sustainability. Right? When people think about social strategy, they think about scale, right? And this is really difficult because the future is unknown, right? If you're a startup, why do I even care about sustainability? I don't even know if I'm going to be in business, in 5 years. So people don't think about that. But this is exactly where science can really help you, right? Because what is the job of a scientist? Scientists create models to predict the future. Right? Whether it's weather model or planetary motion, ocean currents, right? We predict all kinds of things, right? We can't predict everything, but we predict something, right? So that takes away some of the uncertainties in the future so that you can actually think a little longer term. All right, that's where science can really help you. And what's better is that the future never saturates. Right? You can scale this 50, 100, 200, 300 years, never saturate. Doesn't saturate like scale, okay? So a successful brand must adopt a social strategy that's both scalable and sustainable, right? So scalable, people can already do. Right? Sustainable, not many people are even thinking about it, okay? So what would such a strategy look like? Okay, so I had the great pleasure to work with this man here. Anybody know this man? It's Jeffrey Moore, okay? He wrote some of the best-selling business books that you probably have read or have heard of, right? Crossing the Chasm. And he's one of the, probably one of the most well-respected technology advisors in the Silicon Valley, right? And he introduced me something called the 4 gears model. Okay, so the 4 gears model actually starts with, has 4 gears, but I'm going to start with 2 of the gear that every one of you are familiar with, right? So the gear are 2 gear that everyone is familiar with is the acquisition gear and the monetization gear. Right, this is basically how business is done for hundreds and hundreds of years. You acquire a customer and you monetize them. That's it. Right? How you do that is context specific to your business. Right? But that's the basic model. Very simple. Right? There's a traditional way of business. But then so where do you acquire a customer? You basically acquire a customer in the market. Right? And you monetize in your company. Right? If you monetize somewhere else, you are either giving your money away or building out somebody else's brand. Right? So, but something changed in 1991. Right? This anybody read Clue Train Manifesto? Right? Pretty famous book. Right? So what is the gist of this book? It says, it's right up there. Right? The market have changed. Now the markets are conversation. Right? Okay. Now if you so let me ask you a question. Right? If markets are conversation, where do you think people are having conversation today? Where are they having conversation? On the web, right? On social media, right? Something like this, right? So now if you are a very pragmatic CEO, right, or business owner, what would you do? Think about this. What would you do? Well, I acquire, normally, for hundreds of years, I acquire customers were in the market. Right now, the market are conversation, and people are having conversation here. So what do? You basically just have to acquire on social media, right? So now, as a result, even though the market landscape have completely changed, right? People are still doing this: acquire and monetize, right? Now, this is actually neither sustainable nor neither scalable nor sustainable. Okay, and part of the reason that this is not scalable and sustainable is that you actually don't acquire anything that you own on social media, right? You can actually, you may think that you have 1,000, 10,000, or a million fans, right? You don't own those fans. Mark Zuckerberg owns them, right? You may have, a million followers on Twitter. You don't own those followers. Twitter still owns them for you, right? So what are you actually acquiring then? What are you acquiring? Yes, okay, attention, right? But people's attention changes very quickly, right? So yes, you can monetize them while you capture their attention, right? So you can monetize them while you capture their attention, but very quickly they move away, right? So what that means is that you have to take the money that you just earned from monetizing them to acquire them back. So not very sustainable or scalable, right? So that's why. Now, so Jeffrey Moore basically says that in order to have a sustainable social strategy in the social world, you have to have two extra gear. And this is basically the engagement gear, right? And the first extra gear is the engagement gear. So what does engagement do for you? Well, if you're trying to acquire people's attention, what does engagement do? What? Holds attention, right? So extend the attention. Keeps the attention, sustain it for a longer period of time. So that's great, right? That means if you can sustain it longer, you can monetize it longer. Simple, right? Now, that's not the story, right? This is only one part of the feedback loop, right? If you can monetize them, then after you monetize them, you can actually enlist some of your customers, right? And some of those will be very big fans of your brand, right? You can actually enlist them to help you acquire even more, right? Now, when you have all 4 of these gear all spinning in sync, right, you create something called a viral loop. Okay. Wow, should we run? All right. All right. So you create something called a viral loop. Right? So that's basically a positive feedback loop that's going to sustain itself. Right? Now that works only if you have all 4 of the gear all spinning at pretty much at the same speed. Right? If any one of these gears slows down, you break that feedback loop, then everything comes to a grinding halt. Right? So today we are going to focus on engagement. Okay, so specifically on community engagement, because that's what you're interested about here. Each one of these is actually a 1-hour talk. So if you're going to talk about all 4 gear, you'd be here 4 hours, you'd be very, very hungry, and that wouldn't be very nice. Right? So engagement. So how many people here think engagement is difficult? How many think so? A lot of people think so. Okay? Let me prove you wrong. Okay? Have you tried this? Cute cats and puppy, right? You can engage people with these things, okay? But, okay, the thing is, what's challenging about engagement is not the fact that you cannot engage. It's the fact that, you cannot sustain it, okay? So engagement is actually not hard. It's sustained engagement that's difficult. I think that's what you meant, right, when you raised your hand back then, right? Sustained engagement is a difficult thing. Engagement, anyone can engage. You could play a game, right? People will engage and play with you for a while. Try to play the game, for 2 months, 3 months, or a year. Not sustainable, right? Try to use this kitten and puppy pictures. Send it to your friends, right? Your friends will actually engage with you for a little bit. But if you do that for a month, right, you'll be unfriend, right? So, okay. So one of the things that I find from analyzing a lot of our data is that, what is the common criteria for this sustained engagement? And what we find is that, a prerequisite for sustained engagement is a strong relationship. You have to have a strong relationship. Right? We look at all the relationship all the people that we engage with sustainably over a long period of time, right? Think about it. Look at who you engage with over a long period of time. You have some strong relationship with those people. Okay? That doesn't mean that having a strong relationship is enough, right? It's a necessary condition, but it's not sufficient, right? But by itself, right? But it is a required condition. All right, so let's take a look at this a little deeper, right? Because that basically leads us to a question. Well, what is, we have to understand a little bit about how relationships work, right? Relationship. Now, to answer that question, we basically have to look at the lifecycle relationship. Right? Every relationship starts out disconnected. No one's born with a relationship, right? So the first step in creating a relationship is basically you create a weak tie, right? And then you have to build that tie strength for the weak tie become a strong tie. And after you get a strong tie, that's not the end of it. A lot of people are very happy then, and then they stop doing what they're doing, and then things go bad, right? Because that strong tie actually needs maintenance. You have to maintain that strong tie. Right? And if you do nothing, then the strong tie reverts back to a weak tie. And if you do something really bad to your friend, then you get disconnected. Right? That's how relationships work. Right? For ages. Before they were computer, before they were social media, before they were online communities. All right? Okay. Now, creating a weak tie is really, really easy. Right? What's your name? Rob. What? Rob? Yes. Nice meeting you. I have just created a weak tie. It's very easy, right? All it takes is hello. Now, how do you build your weak ties into a strong tie, and how do you maintain those strong ties? The interesting question is actually, where does that happen? Okay, so to answer that question, we actually have to understand a little bit about how the difference between social network and community, right? So you guys here are all community practitioners. So let me ask you, can you define what a community is for me? How many people do you want to try? Yeah?
A group of like-minded individuals that engage in social support.
Okay. Does it have to be social support?
Some kind of support.
Okay. All right. So very good. Very close. That's good job. Okay. So social network and community are both very, very robust social structure. They existed for hundreds and hundreds of years. Before they were social media, before they were computers. Right? So let's take a look at how people built their social network before there were social media. Okay? Let's do that by following this hypothetical character named Bob as he built his social network. Right? So let's say Bob actually come to this community called Februrary, and it's a community that consists of some weak ties. Right? These are people who don't know each other really well. Right? And there's also strong ties in the community. These people may be people who know each other for a long time. They may even be families. Right? So they have strong ties there. And there's also these old members who tend to have a lot of strong ties. And there's new members or casual members who don't have very many ties at all, right? So the first step that Bob does when it comes to the community is that he creates weak ties, right? As I said before, nobody's born with those relationships. But over time, some of those weak ties get converted into a strong tie, right? Not all of it, some of it, right? So the dotted lines are weak ties, the solid lines are strong ties, okay? So, and then something could happen, right? Say he go to US, go to college, right? Right? And then notice what happened. Even though he has left the community, right, the strong ties, the relationship that he built, he didn't lose those relationships because they're strong ties, right? He took those relationships with him to college, right? So, and the same thing could happen in college, right? The college, he can actually meet hundreds and hundreds of people, right? Some of those will become his strong ties, and then he would take those with him to work, and then same thing happens in work, right? So as you can see, social network kind of form naturally as people establish this relationship within a community, right? Moreover, it maintains people's relationship as people move between communities, right? These are different communities, right? This is his hometown, this is college, this is work, right? Different community, right? So this is how it works before they were actually computer and social media, right? So the difference between social network and community is really what holds these group of people together, right? So a social network is held together by pre-existing interpersonal relationship. So Facebook is a social network. It's held together by pre-existing friendship, right? LinkedIn is a social network held together by professional relationships, right? Now, community, on the other hand, is a group of people held together by common interests. That's it. Simple as that, right? There are many different types of community. There's community of interest, community of practice. There's many, many different types of community, customer community, branded community. But ultimately, the commonality, there's actually, if you ask the academics here, there's probably, 15, 20 definitions of community. But the common theme is that these people have a common interest. A group of people with common interests. That's what it is, right? So that being said, right, social network, right, it doesn't mean that the common interest doesn't exist. It's just that that's not what holds a group together, right? Some of your friends may happen to have the same interests that you are, right? But if they don't have the same interests as you are, you're not going to unfriend them because that's not what holds you together. It's your relationship that holds you together, right? And community is just the opposite, right? So community, you may have a relationship here, right? Here, we are all in a big community right here. We have a common interest around building better and more lively communities, right? Some of you know each other for a long time. You're good friends and colleagues, right? Some of you, I just met the first time, right? Relationship is not required here, okay? Now, the most important words in the definition of social network here is pre-existing, okay? So academics have actually surveyed people's Facebook friendship and found that like over 99%, close to 100% of their friendship on Facebook were established somewhere else. They were already established. Look at your Facebook friends, right? Do you know them on Facebook? Probably not, right? Okay, so they were already existing friendships. So I have to ask, well, as a scientist, right? I mean, kind of wonder, these are relationships that already exist, so where were they first established? You wonder about that? Exactly, in communities, right? So if you look at, so it turns out that, the community is actually where weak ties are built into strong ties, right? And social network is the structure that maintains those strong ties. All right? Okay, so now, and in fact, I kind of talk about these structures separately, right? They actually overlap, right? They overlap in the physical world. Even in the digital world, they do overlap, right? So Twitter is actually a hybrid, Right? You could follow some people because you know them, or because you like what they have to say. You have the same interests as you do, right? So they are not actually mutually exclusive, right? So let's ask one deeper question, right? What is a relationship? Now we know, now that we know, how the life cycle relationship, right? How to build relationship from weak tie to strong, where that happened, right? So we know that it happens in community, and then strong ties are actually maintained in social network. Let's ask one deeper question. What is a relationship? Right? So relationship is one of those things that we are all very familiar with ourselves, right? We could recognize it. But if I ask you to define it, people usually have a hard time, right? Unfortunately, sociologists have already done this for us, right? Basically, a relationship is a tie or a connection between two parties, okay? And these, between two entities, right? These entities could be anything, right? For us, these entities are typically people. And there's a tie strength that characterizes how strong this relationship is. And there is a professor by the name of Mark Granovetter, who's at Stanford, who wrote a very influential paper in the 70s called The Strength of Weak Tie. And he basically postulated that there's actually 4 components of tie strength: time, intensity, trust, and reciprocity, right? So time is actually the amount of time that you spend together, right? It's not the duration of the relationship, right? I may know my cousin, right, ever since he's born, but if I don't spend time, playing with him, beating him up, or growing up with him, then I actually don't have a strong relationship with my cousin, right? It's the actual time they spend together. And intensity is this, emotional intensity, right? A sense of closeness. For example, if you're related, right? You have blood related, your parents, your spouse, or this strong emotional intensity. Trust is basically how transparent you are, okay? How open you are, right? If I am completely transparent to you, it means I trust you a lot, okay? Reciprocity is very simple, right? Amount of reciprocal service that you do for one another. Okay, so that's the component of relationship. Now, if you don't remember this, that's okay. We're going to revisit this just a bit, right? Strong relationship, just remember this for now, right? Strong relationship requires a lot of time and attention, both to build and to maintain, okay? Now, the problem is that we have an attention economy today, right? We only have 24 hours, and we have a fixed amount of attention. So how many relationships can we actually have? Take a guess. Huh? 120? Very close. Very close, okay? Have you ever heard of this number, Dunbar limit? Right? The Dunbar number? So this is 150, right? That's what Professor Dunbar here, UK professor here, found this phenomena. It's actually quite interesting how he actually found this, right? So, how many of you actually heard of Dunbar number? Okay. Good, right? How many of you actually know how he discovered that? Okay, cool. Okay, so I'm going to tell you how he actually finds this. Okay, so he's actually a primate kind of a biologist. He actually studies primates, and he actually have data. He find the neocortex, basically the size of the brain. Okay, and then the size of the groups of that species of primate. And he have 38 species of primate that he studied, and I don't think it takes a genius to see that these data kind of follow some kind of trend here, right? So he said, that's interesting. The bigger the brain you have, the bigger the group size you have. Okay? But we know how big the human brain is, right? So what that means is that we can actually extrapolate, and basically that's how he did what he did, and he came up with this number 148, or rounded off to 150. That's how he find the Dunbar number, right? Extrapolation. Okay, so being a good scientist, right, he basically said, well, that can be true, right? That's, that's kind of weird, right? Especially today with social media. And then, he basically went back and surveyed a lot of pre-industrial tribes and villages. And surprise, they were not exactly 150, but, on average, they're about 150. Some of them are 100, some of them 200, but on average, they are about 150. Surprise, surprise, right? So now, the real question for us today is, does the Dunbar limit actually hold today? Does it actually hold today in the modern society, right? So to answer that question, we basically need a little bit of mathematical tool, right? We need something called this relationship profile, right? So this relationship profile is really easy to construct, right? You could do this with your relationships, right? We could order our relationship from the strongest one to the weakest one, right? For example, I would put, some of you, you have a spouse, probably that's the strongest relationship. You have children, maybe they come next. You have parents, maybe they come next. You may have some siblings, right? And you may have some best friends. Some of your best friends, close friends, may actually be closer than your siblings, stronger, right? And you can order them, these relationships, from the strongest one all the way to the weakest one, right? Now, these are, I would say, I don't have a word for these people. These are actually strong ties, right? So these are not acquaintances that you don't care about. These are acquaintances that you actually do care about, right? So I call this close acquaintance, okay? I don't have a better word for this. So if you think of a better word, let me know, okay? So, all right, so this basically creates what I call a relationship profile. Everybody have a relationship profile. Everybody's relationship profile is different. They're shaped differently, right? If you are people who spend time equally with every one of your friends, then your relationship profile will be pretty flat, right? If you like most of us who spend a lot more time without strong ties, then it will kind of fall off like that, okay? So that's what the relationship profile is, right? So now in the pre-industrial village, right, and tribes that you survey, right, basically it cuts off at 150. Right. Now, Dunbar's limit, so let's go back, now that we have this tool, right, let's go back and answer the question, right? Does Dunbar limit actually apply today, right? So there's several reasons that Dunbar limit may not apply today. And that basically that's, the necessity for social cohesion is actually a lot weaker today, right? If we don't stay in a group, we won't die, we won't get eaten by a lion, right? Whereas before, it's really important, right? If you don't stay in a group, you could be in real danger, right? But the more interesting question is, well, today, communication is actually a lot more efficient. Right, maybe that will help us maintain more relationship. Do you think that's true? Yes? No? Okay. But what did Professor Dunbar use as a predictor? Size of your brain, right? So do you think our size of our brain have changed in the last, thousands of years? Not really, right? Actually, our brain has shrunk a little bit since the Neanderthals. Just a tiny bit, about 2.53%, right? So our brain hasn't changed, right? So what that means is that, actually we can have more than 150 friends, but it comes with a trade-off, okay? And this trade-off comes with several ways. Well, first is that we can have fewer strong ties, right? So what that means is that we are basically taking this relationship profile and squash it sideways like this, okay? Squash it sideways. And what we're actually doing is that we're taking some of the time and attention that's needed to maintain those strong ties, and we allocate them to the weaker ties. That's what we do, okay? Another way that we could do this is that we have a weaker strong tie, right? Basically, we are taking this relationship profile and then we squash it down vertically like this, okay? And again, we are taking these time and attention that's needed to maintain those with strong ties and give it to the weaker ties, right? So now, if you don't remember this calculus, it's okay. This is one equation you have to remember, right? Basically, is that integral of that yellow curve is equal to that integral of that blue curve. Anybody just ring a bell? Calculus? No? Okay, so in English, okay, that's what I mean, right? The area under the yellow curve is the same as the area under that blue curve, right? So now, if that still doesn't help you, right, what that means is that we can shift the time and attention around, right? But the total amount is fixed, right? We can't really, change that, right? The total amount remains the same, right? Okay, so that's actually how human relationship work, right? How can we actually apply this relationship, what we learned about human relationship, to customer relationship with brands, right? So one thing that I have to say before I go on is that customer relationship with brands is always going to be weaker than interpersonal relationship with people, right? That's just part of being human. There's nothing you can do about that, okay? So now that actually leads to a very interesting phenomenon that I call the Facebook irony, okay? So Facebook, remember what is it? Facebook is a social network, right? So what is its job? What have you learned from the beginning? To maintain the strong ties, right? And Facebook is actually doing a really good job at that, right? Because all of our strongest ties are on Facebook, right? Pretty much all of all my best friends and family, and they're all on Facebook. So it's doing a really, really good job at maintaining those strong ties. And by definition, the strong tie is going to take a lot more time and attention, right? And this is kind of, this is the irony. I call this irony is because, Facebook is doing too good of a job and maintaining those strong ties, that it creates a problem for yourself. Right? And the problem that you create for yourself is that in the presence of those strong ties, the weaker ties become harder to develop into a strong one. Right? You probably experience this yourself, right? Have you traveled to a country where you have no friends at all? Yeah, do you find it really easy to make friends at those places? A lot easier, right? If you move into a town that you don't know anyone, it's a lot easier to make friends there, right? I'm talking about those strong ties, right? It's really easy to create a weak tie, right? All it takes is a hello, right? But to create those strong ties, it takes a lot of time and attention, right? So those are the strong ties. Those are the relationships that I'm talking about, right? So the weaker ties get really hard to develop into a strong one in the presence of the other strong ties. That's demanding your time and attention, right? And they're going to win most of the time because they are, by definition, strong ties. They're going to win most of your time and attention, right? So the moral of the story is really simple. If you already have a strong relationship with a customer, great. Maintain it on Facebook is the way to go, right? But if you don't already have a strong relationship with your customer, trying to build that on Facebook, it's going to be harder. Okay? Because, why? Because most consumers, everybody have all of their strongest tie on Facebook, and those strong ties are going to compete for the limited time and attention that they have, which is required to build the weak ties into a strong tie. And guess what? Who are the weak ties? Relationship with brands, right? Okay? So it's kind of like this little puppy here, right? So Facebook is really great for strong ties, right? But not so good for building the weak ties, right? So this car is great to be fast, but maybe too fast for your dog, right? So now, in light of the Facebook irony, how can brands build stronger relationship with their customers? Okay? So let's go back to the basic then. Well, we know the components of relationship. Okay? We know time, intensity, trust, and reciprocity. So basically, if we're able to build each one of these components individually, what we end up is that we will have a stronger relationship with our customer or with your community members, right? So first component, let's look at time, right? Time, like I said, is the time spent together, right? Not the duration of the relationship, right? So how many people here, think that it's very simple, right? Time actually increases your tie string. People believe that? Agree? Not that simple, though. Have you ever tried to spend time with people that don't want to spend time with you? The more time you spend with them, the worse it gets, right? So it's like this, right? Now, so if the desire to spend time together is mutual, then yes, spending more time together builds your stronger relationship, right? Turns this intensity, to love, right? But if the desire is non-mutual, something is really bad, right? So, the more time you spend, right, the more it's going to hit you, right? It's like a stalker, right? So it's not good, right? So time increases your tie string, right? Only if the desire to spend time together is mutual, right? So what's the key here? The key here is really know when your community member wants to spend time with you, right? When they want to spend time with you, be there for them. When they don't want to spend time with you, don't bug them, right? All right, so that's key number one, right? Intensity. Second component, right? So like I said, customers or community members, like for intensity for a brand, it's going to be much lower than their intensity for a friend, right? Like I said, there's nothing you can do about that. It's just part of being human, right? So part of it is genetic that we have no control over, right? But there are actually tactics that we can leverage. And one of the most appealing tactic, or the most effective tactic that I know of, is basically appeal to a greater cause, right, that these community members care about. Okay? So they will have a strong emotional kind of attachment or association with those greater cause, and they will associate those with the community or with the brand, right? So, for example, Coca-Cola, they have these polar bear commercials in the US. I don't know if they show them in the UK. Have you seen those, right? So we want to save environment so the polar bear can survive, right? So if people are very conscious about environmental and conservation of the polar ice cap, then they will associate some of those strong emotions with drinking Coke, right? Appealing to a greater cause beyond your brand, not just your company, right? So the key here is really don't try too hard here, right? This is the component that we have the least control of. If it works for you, great, right? don't fake it. The key is don't fake it. Don't create a fake cause, right? Because it's going to backfire, okay? People will find out, and it's going to be really, really bad. It's worse than if you haven't used it in the beginning, in the first place, right? So the third component is trust. So trust is where community and social media can really, really help you, right? So trust, like I said, is basically transparency, right? A transparent environment is really conducive for building trust, right? Okay, so there's actually two types of trust that when it comes to customers, right? So there's one is what I call B2C, right? These are brand to customer trust, transparency, right? And you could basically build this type of trust with any social media platform, any tools that you want, right? Blogs, Twitter, right? Or anything that allow you to kind of share about how your company works to these people. That will work, right? So Logitech, right? I use a clicker here, but I'm kind of curious how they actually make this clicker, right? Create a video, share about it, right? The more you try, these are stuff that normally goes behind the wall of the corporate, right? So people may not know how that happened, but the more you're able to let them see behind that wall, the better it is, right? The more transparent you become, right? The more stronger relationships that are built, right? So another type of relationship is C2C, right? These are peer-to-peer transparency, right? What that means is that, one customer should be allowed to find out how another customer think about the brand, right? So this is really where community comes in, right? Community is all about that, peer-to-peer conversation there. Now, there's another way to build trust, right? That's basically co-creation. And why does co-creation work? Is because people ultimately trust themselves, right? People tend to trust themselves, regardless, even they have doubts about themselves, they ultimately probably trust themselves the most, right? So now co-creation is basically, the customer telling the brand what to do, and the brand actually take their idea, implement it, and give it back to the customer, right? So in some sense, the customer have a say in what the brand do. So when brands that co-create with customer tend to gain more trust from the customer because the customer now have a say, right? So they trust themselves. All right, so there's also two types of co-creation. One is called passive, right? Passive is when you're just listening to conversation out there and then use sophisticated text analytics, right, to extract, intent and all this stuff to understand what people want. Just collect intelligence, right? So it works, okay? If you have good enough machine learning and the technology will help you with that. But there's another way that's actually easier, and that's actually active co-creation. Basically, crowdsource, right? Just ask your customer, right? If they're truly enthusiastic about it, they will tell you, right? So the key to building trust, this third component, is really two things, right? Create a transparent and authentic communication channel from the brand to the customer and also among the customer themselves, right? So that's key number one. Number two is basically co-create with your customer, right? Because if they have a say in what your business do, then they trust your business a lot more, right? So the last component is reciprocity. So reciprocity is the two-way reciprocal services, right? Remember, there's a two-way, right? So it means from the customer to the brand. You have to make it really easy for the customer to help the brand, and you also need to kind of treat your customer right, serve them right? Essentially, treat them well. So, and also another way to kind of build reciprocity is co-creation as well. Co-creation actually creates a cycle reciprocity because when you co-create with the brand, you basically, you tell the brand what to do, and then the brand actually implement what you do and give it back to you. So he's helping you, right? You are helping the brand create a product that more customer want, and the brand is also helping you to create a better product for you, right? So you are helping each other that way, right? So the key here to building this reciprocity component is don't forget to let your customer help you, right? We know that from human relationship, right? If in human relationship, if one person is taking all the initiative and all the effort to put effort into this relationship, right? That relationship is not as strong as if a relationship where two people contribute, right? We know that for human relationship, but somehow brands forget that all the time. So I'm serving my customers. I'm serving them really well. Yes, but have you let them serve you? Most people, no, I haven't do that. Right? They forgot about that, right? So the key here really is, don't forget to let them help you, but it has to be opt-in, right? You can't force them to help you, right? If you force them to help you, then this doesn't work, right? So it actually turns very ugly. So now we know. Okay, so in human relationship, we know that we build those relationships when weak tie to strong tie in the community, right? And what about these customer relationships? So in light of the Facebook irony, we know that we cannot really do this on the Facebook, on the social network, where our time and attention is demanded by our strong ties, right? And a lot of strong ties there, right? So let's take a look at, does it actually work in the customer community? So customer communities are usually always opt-in, right? So it's there for you to participate whenever you want it, right? No, there's no pushiness, right? You don't have to, you can participate as much as you want or as little as you want. Totally opt-in, right? So meet the time component, right? This is there when you want to spend time with it. When you don't want to spend time with it, they won't bug you, right? Second component may have a greater cost, right? Doesn't have to be, but some of them do, right? So third component, trust, certainly meets that, right? Community is definitely an open, transparent channel, and it's also a platform for co-creation, right? And lastly, reciprocity, right? Enables reciprocity between the brand and the customer, and also enables another type of reciprocity called C2C, customer-to-customer reciprocity, basically peer-to-peer reciprocity, right? Members can actually help one another, right? That creates reciprocity that way too. So it turns out that customer relationships are built pretty much the same way as interpersonal relationships, in the sense that they are built in the community, right? They're not built in the social network. Social network is the maintenance of that relationship after you have built that, right? So all that is you say, well, that sounds great. What's the monetary implication, right? Let's talk money, right? So now remember earlier I said that with this 4-gear model, right? Engagement help you sustain monetization. How do you think that happens? How do you think that happens? Well, that happens by turning your customer into loyal customers, right? By building a stronger relationship, your customer will become more loyal to you, okay? And when they become more loyal to you, you can monetize them over and over again. And in fact, that's what loyalty means. Loyalty to the brand means you can monetize them over and over and over again, right? So we have a few case studies here, right? So FICO is one of our clients, is a credit scoring company. So when you need to get a loan, your bank will actually check your FICO score, right? So they actually, we actually have a case study with them over 3 years. So it's kind of nice. So we can see that comparing member to non-member spending, right? There's actually a steady increase over the 3 year, right? So, okay, these are fractional. These are kind of, if you look at only 1 year, this is kind of small fractional increase, right? 37%, right? But if you look at a total, right? The total cumulative gain, that's pretty significant, right? Because these are people who actually, repeat purchase over year, right? So basically, so loyal customer, basically their behavioral manifestation is that they purchase repeatedly over year, right? And so the total cumulative gain can be really huge because the customer lifetime can be really long, right? Don't underestimate the power of time, right? So yeah, so you get this kind of multiplicative increase, like 300%, right? Something like really, really big. So compare a non-member spending level, right? So over time. Now so FICO is a product that people probably don't buy very often, right? They buy one when they need to get a loan, right? They probably once a year to check their credit score. But this effect is actually very prominent for product and services that you could purchase very quickly, purchase very frequently, okay? So we have another case study with Sephora, right? So Sephora, they actually find that community member actually spend 2.5 times more, okay? And then there's these super fans in the community that actually spend 10 times more, right? And these are tracked with loyalty cards. So they actually were able to control for people who are not in the community and versus people who are actually joining the community after the community have launched, right? So, all right, so that's basically what I have to say about engagement, right? So this is just a little review here, right? So key to sustained engagement is relationship, right? So how do you build relationship in the community, right? So we learned about the fact that relationships are maintained in social node, but they're built in the community. There's 4 components to relationship, and that's time, intensity, trust, and reciprocity. And we learned about the Facebook irony, okay? In the presence of strong ties, which you have a lot of on Facebook, right? The weaker ties are really hard to develop into strong ones, right? And in light of that, right, brands can still build strong relationship with their customers, right, by building each one of these 4 components, right? Time, intensity, trust, and reciprocity. And you could do that in the community really well, right? And then the result of that is that once you get a strong relationship, you will get loyal customer, which means you can sustain monetization over and over and over again, okay? So now you know how to spin one of this gear, right? You may ask, well, what about the other gears, right? So there's actually a workshop tomorrow that's about acquisition and enlistment, right? So I think the time has changed or something. Do you want to make a little announcement on that?
We'll do it in a minute.
Okay, yeah. So I'll be talking about it. So yeah. So the other 2 gears, right? So if you wanted to hear about how those gears fit together and work together, right? Because this is all about how everything works together that actually drives value, right? So that's it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for doing that. I think we have time for 2 or 3 questions, if we have a microphone around. If we have any. I'm so blind, I can't see anything. Anyone?
Paul, right here.
Paul.
I actually want to really hear Kevin challenge Michael on the Sephora analysis. And I'm curious to hear what they'll say about it.
Yeah, so let me try to address that because so causality is actually, so I'm a data geek. So strictly speaking, you cannot prove causality with data alone. You cannot, okay? Just as you cannot prove smoking causes cancer with data. You cannot prove that, okay? Because you try to equalize, pick population that's the same, right? But you can never guarantee that they're the same, right? If there's a significant effect in one group versus another, where the only difference is the community, right? That group may already have a propensity, maybe genetically, there's some variable that you not track, right? So that you cannot prove with data, okay? That's just, if you ask economists or something like that, they will probably agree that that's not provable. But so the best thing that we could do is to track like before and after. Okay, so we know we have a control population that people before the community join, and after the community have launched, before the community launched, they did not join because obviously there's no community to join, right? So before the community launched, they didn't join, but after the community, they still didn't join. And another population where they did not join before the community, but after the community, they actually joined, right? And they have loyalty card, they will track their spending patterns. So you may see that, the control group may see an increase, right? So for your experimental group, where the people who actually join community, they have to have an additional increase over that to be significant, right? Otherwise, it's just the same as the population. Maybe just the economies get better, so everybody spends just more, right? So you have to track the additional increase in that. And that's how they did that, concluded this result. But strictly speaking, you cannot, like I said, if you really want to be nitpicking, right, and I'm a data geek, and I will be very picky, right? I could challenge you that, this is actually not proving causality, okay? Because how do you know those people who join the community weren't going to join in the future anyway? You can't prove that, right? So that's something that, you just can't prove with data, right? So the best way to go about proving causality is experimentation, okay? How does, media like these advertising company able to prove that their advertising is providing value, right? They experiment with it. They shut it off and they see that it decreased, right? And they just turn it back on and they increase, right? So experimentation is actually the best way to prove causality, right? If you just look at data, static data that you collected, you can't prove that with data alone.
Just one more.
Yeah. Does that address your question? Yeah. Kevin?
I actually worked with the managing director at Sephora, and I believe in her, so she could probably get those results.
Okay. More questions. Okay.
Wait.
Yeah.
You were talking about the challenge of maintaining strong ties and how you sort of turn a weak tie into a strong one. If a strong tie has weakened over time, is there any difference between the challenges of turning that weak tie into a strong tie versus somebody who previously had no relationship at all?
Yeah, that's very different. It's actually much easier to revive a weak tie that's turned weak from being a strong one, right? So you probably know that from some of your school reunions, right? I mean, you were best buddies with this, but then people move on with their lives, right? And then after 10 years, you go back to school reunion. You especially with Facebook today, right? You keep a little bit of conversation going on, and you know a little bit about what's going on with their life, right? When you go back there, when you just conversation comes up, just as you never left, right? So it's actually, but it does require that engagement. It does require that time. You just need to spend that time. So usually there's a forgetting curve, right? So typically it jumps up, right, when you re-engage, but over time it decays, right? It decays. But once you re-engage, it jumps up again, right? So there's a decay rate. So.
Okay, we're going to have to end it there. Everyone, please give a huge round of applause for Michael Wu.
Thank you.
Thank you, that was amazing.